Hey guys, welcome back. This is EsportsJohn, and today I'm going to be talking about soaking experience. This is something I wanted to talk about for a while because it's something that bothers me greatly whenever I'm playing pubs and things like that, is to watch people not soak properly or not understand how to soak. So I just want to talk about some of the things that has to do with soaking experience in this game and why it's important. So. First of all, I just want to talk about League of Legends for a moment. Because I went through a League of Legends phase. I don't want to say I necessarily came from there. Um, but I went through a League of Legends phase for a while, and it's very different in Heroes of the Storm compared to League of Legends because being in lane, while it does give you an advantage, in terms of like getting gold and things like that, there are some similarities. The whole global experience thing is kind of a completely different feeling. So, for instance, like one person in League of Legends, for instance, you can have 5 people in one lane, but if only one person has wave clear and they're getting all of the gold for every wave, they're still getting fed and they're getting very strong on their own. Um, Whereas in Here's the Storm, if all 5 people are in one lane, you're just getting very, very far behind. It's a real problem. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you always are soaking all the lanes pretty evenly in Here's the Storm in order to actually stay ahead and even with your opponent. So it's a pretty unique concept, I think, the whole global experience. But there's been lots of ways that people have figured out how to deal with it and how to get around it. So I'm just gonna go and talk about some of those things today. Um, First of all, we talk about Heroes of the Storm as not having a laning phase, so to say. When you think about a game like Dota or League of Legends, the laning phase is a lot more protracted. I think that's the correct word. It's a lot longer. And so you have a very obvious laning phase where you have kind of like a 1v1 or a 2v2 that just goes on for a long time, and people are constantly fighting back and forth, and there's occasional ganks and things like that. In Heroes of the Storm, this is less. This happens a lot less because we have objectives and things like that that come up early. You think about stuff like Blackheart's Bay, you have a 55-second timer. Like you have a fight at 55 seconds no matter what you do. Like you're gonna have a fight over the treasure chests. Sky Temple, I think right around 2 minutes is um, when the first temples activate, and so you have to go fight over those. So the game forces you to fight early, and on top of that, because the maps are generally smaller, you can also get away with a lot more roaming and ganks and things like that without losing too much experience, which I'll get to later. But you can move to other lanes and things like that, and it's not a huge deal compared to something like League of Legends, where if you walk all the way up from bot lane to mid lane, you're missing a pretty huge chunk of experience and gold for that. So it's a pretty big drawback. So it's important to soak all the lanes, but the laning phase is a lot more fluid than some of the other MOBAs out there. Um, but there are many ways to get around this and make sure that you're focusing on soaking experience when you need to be. The general times that you need to be soaking XP is basically every time before 10. That's when you want to get as much experience as possible, because whoever gets to level 10 first gets their heroics first, which means that you basically can win a 5v5 team wipe with like you can just team wipe. And that's super important, getting to level 10 first. Whoever gets to level 10 first, if you get to level 10 half a level before your opponents, you have free and complete uncontested control of the map because they can't engage you, or else they'll just lose because the heroics are that powerful. So It's very important to soak for level 10. The other time that you really want to soak is when you're behind. Say you're level 9 to level 10. Um, that's an important time for when you need to soak. But also anytime you're just a talent tier down, you need to soak. So if, say for instance, you're level 12 versus a level 13 team, you can't engage them properly until you have 13. It's a much better thing if you're half a level or even like a third or a fourth level away from achieving level 13. Just sit in lane for a couple more seconds, get one more wave, and then try to fight. If you try to fight before you get level 13, you're going to be a talent down, and it's going to be a lot harder. Not as hard as the 9 versus 10 fight, but it'll still be harder. It's really important to catch up and get where you need to be. The other time is also when you're ahead. It seems a little bit backwards, but you can also soak when you're ahead, and that also helps you get more ahead. So say for instance, think back to my Infernal Shrines video. My Infernal Shrines video, I talk about how if you win the Punisher fight, if you win the Shrine fight, and you get a Punisher, the best thing that you can do as a team is to just immediately start soaking again. For the first one or two Punishers. And the reason for that is if you're getting the Punisher, not only have you probably gotten a few kills and you've gotten a little bit ahead in experience, but also the Punisher will push for you. And while it probably won't do a lot, it probably will maybe get you a tower or two, which will pull you ahead in experience. And it also gives you the freedom to go ahead and soak earlier, which also allows you to get even further ahead. So at the end of that, if you do this correctly for one or two shrines, you'll hit level 10, like, maybe like a full level up, maybe even a level and a half on your opponents. If you do it perfectly and your opponents don't react correctly. So it's a pretty big deal to take advantage of soaking experience when you're ahead as well, but you also don't want to make that a priority when you have an advantage. Say for instance, you hit level 60 and your opponents are level 13 and you just got a Punisher. You don't want to immediately start splitting and soaking all the lanes for experience. You want to push because you have an advantage with the Punisher, with the talent tier, etc. So you have to make sure you find a nice balance between when you're supposed to soak and split up and when you're supposed to group together as a team and do objectives. And that's kind of a hard balance to find, especially in pubs and Hero League games where you're matched with just a bunch of random people who don't have much coordination and don't really know, they aren't really paying attention to when they have advantages. So in those cases, you really just kind of have to pay attention on your own and figure out where you need to be and try to be a leader on your team and get people to go where they need to be as well, whether that's soaking or attacking. I want to talk about, you don't have to be in lane 24/7 to soak. So that's another big thing that people run into is you have like soaking purists. I like to think of them as people who like throw an absolute crazy fit if you leave your lane for any second to do anything. And naturally, I understand where that frustration comes from. It comes from a long line of that person having to deal with people just randomly wandering out of their lane and leaving it for, you know, for like a good solid minute or two and losing tons of experience for your team. But you don't have to be in lane all of the time in order to soak experience. You can leave the lane for moments. And in fact, we see this in professional games where people will leave the lane for a moment and go ahead and do a gank. Or in professional games, we see a lot of 4-1 splits, especially on things like Tomb of the Spider Queen, where one team we get a bunch of heroes with a bunch of wave clear, and they'll go clear one wave in mid, and then rotate up top and clear another wave top, and then rotate down to mid again, and then clear another wave, and then back and forth. And in doing so, they also set up very strong 4-man ganks. as well, but they also don't lose any significant experience. They might lose one minion or two every now and then, but for the most part, they're collecting all the experience from every single minion wave because they're clearing it so fast to get back down to the other one. So, quick little video to show you. This is Dignitas versus YL from the BlizzCon Day 1, and this is the rematch of Game 1. I just want to show you guys, they have the Asmonang composition, which on this map is all about roaming up and down and trying to get those stacks and clearing. So we have Leoric, Johanna, and Asmonang that all kind of travel around together, try to get this stuff done. So you see the three of them are moving up from the mid lane to the top lane. Just going to clear this really fast. And now that they've gotten that, they're just going to head straight back down to the mid lane. Straight back down to the mid lane, and then they clear all this, etc., etc. So obviously that's not something that we can do in Hero League or Quick Match when you have a lot of people who just aren't really coordinated like that. It's a very coordinated thing to try to run these Asmonang compositions like this. But you can still wander out of your lane. There are ways to make it work so that you can achieve something like a 4-man gank without it seeming overly strange or forced, trying to force it on your team. So I just wanna look at this game real quick. This is Cloud9 versus Dignitas in the winners match. And I just want you to pay attention to where Muradin is. I'm gonna give you a preview how this works. So Muradin, he kills off this wave, and another wave is coming. But he knows he has a certain amount of time to get up here to his team. So he's moving up here to help his team gank. And Lyric is actually mirroring him in a very smart way. He gets up here a little bit late, but the important thing is that he walked all the way up here without worrying about the experience. And now he's just gonna go pretty much just straight back down if he can, and go ahead and continue soaking mid lane. And that's not even the first time that he's done it. I just didn't want to show like a full minute or two clip. But for basically all of that game, in between every single wave, he starts to wander up towards the top lane, and then if he sees that there's no potential for a gank, he'll come back down to mid lane and soak. So what's happening is he's moving around constantly and constantly making sure that his team can secure a gank. And this is not a big deal because the minion wave that comes in the middle, at worst, he's probably going to lose maybe like 2 to 3 minions, which, you know, is not great, but it's not the end of the world. As long as he doesn't lose the entire thing to the towers, that's excellent. The biggest thing that you really want to worry about when you're trying to leave lane to go help out your team in a team fight or go gank or something like that, is that you want to make sure that you're not going to lose a huge chunk of experience to towers. So if you have 1 minion left, and the other side has like a huge group of archers, they have like 10 or 12 minions that are about to push down to your fort, don't leave the lane. Just stand there and let the towers kill all the minions, clear it as fast as you can, and make sure you get all of that experience. That's something that a lot of people don't do. They just kind of leave lane arbitrarily because they're not sure when they're supposed to go. It's very important to get those large packs of experience, because if you lose that, that's a pretty huge chunk of experience that you're not getting that is going to accumulate to something like a fourth of a level. You know, it's a pretty big deal. So especially, I just want to say for Abathur players, this is also a pretty good example of this. For Abathur players, that's the kind of thing that you want to be looking for constantly, because your team's, as an Abathur, your job is basically to soak up all of the experience that your team can't. So whenever you see a lane that's empty or a lane that is weaker than the rest of them, you want to position yourself there to be next to the towers to soak, if you can't soak in the lane itself. Or even if you just hat on top of a tower and just sit there and wait until the towers go ahead and kill all of the minions, you're soaking that entire wave, and that's a huge boost to your team. It's really, really important. So as Abathur, you just want to be making sure that you're constantly where these minion waves are pushing in. That'll go back to him in just a second. Pretty sure it will. No, it won't. It's more important. It's more important to watch these people. But basically, you get the idea. As an Abathur, if you see a lane that's pushing down but nobody's defending there, just immediately burrow down there, pick up that experience, or hat a tower if you don't want to move or you don't need to move. It's very important to pick up that XP. So, second thing I also want to talk about is that you don't actually have to kill minions in order to soak. This is something that not a lot of people realize, because I guess it's just natural inclination to just fight the minions, like that's what you're supposed to do. Especially if you come from a MOBA background where all of your advantages come from killing minions, with last hitting and things like that. So it's pretty unique that in this game you actually don't have to kill the minions. You can actually just stand in a lane, and as long as you're standing there and minions are dying, as the two minion waves are crashing, you are still gaining experience for your team. You're still doing what you need to be doing. And so this doesn't happen a lot in lower level games, but you'll see this a lot in higher level games, and especially in pro games. You'll see a lot where people do this thing where they just kind of dance around the lane for a bit. In this particular case, this is them trying to avoid a gank, but that's one of the uses for not attacking. Here's another situation where you see two people just kind of dancing around but not actually attacking any minions, because they don't need to in order to gain the experience. They don't have to push up the lane in any way. And what you gain by this is you gain some protection from ganks because you're not pushing the lane up, but you're still gaining experience for your team. This is something you can't do in League of Legends or Dota, because if you're trying to last hit consistently, it's very difficult for you to actually keep the lane from pushing, because you're always kind of pushing the lane forward. I guess in Dota not so much, because you can pull some of the minions towards tower and kind of reset it. But you can freeze the lane and give yourself some protection from ganks. You also allow yourself a bit of a chance to bully the lane, which is also a pretty big deal. If you're evenly matched with somebody in a 1v1 lane, say a really good example of this is Reyna. Reyna is a great lane bully. So if you have Reyna versus someone like Illidan, Reyna can freeze the lane, stop attacking the minions entirely, and freeze the lane in the middle of the lane. And every time Illidan tries to get close, Reyna can just walk over and start auto-attacking him. And especially if Illidan's low, there's nothing Illidan can do, and he can't get close enough to the minion wave in order to gain experience. This is a really potent tool that you can use to deny your opponent some experience. It's pretty much the same idea as in League of Legends or Dota, where you can still freeze the minion wave and get your last hits, but also you're zoning your opponent off of the experience and keeping them from getting what they need to get. This is more powerful in some ways, but it also doesn't actually change the experience outcome that much, because at most you're probably going to be able to force them out of like 3, 4, maybe 5 minions worth of experience before eventually it starts pushing towards their tower. Or the other thing is it limits your ability to rotate, like I was talking about in the rotations. Whenever you rotate, you want to be clearing the waves as quickly as possible, because when you clear the waves as quickly as possible, that gives you a certain amount of time until the next wave hits. But if you're not clearing the waves, you're consistently losing experience for every moment that you're gone versus waiting for the next wave to show up. So when you freeze the lane, it's a calculated choice. You have to really think about what you're doing there. Is this really beneficial to what I'm doing? Forcing my opponent off of some experience, or do I need to rotate sometime in the near future? It's more important in kind of these island lanes. Like if you think about Blackheart's Bay, the bottom lane is kind of an island to itself. So if you can zone people off of that, it's quite powerful. Versus something like Haunted Mines, where both the lanes are equally yoked. You know, both of them are basically the same distance from each other. It's only 2-lane map, so it doesn't really help you necessarily to sit there and try to zone people off. So, big thing here is basically you don't have to kill the minions to soak, but doing so is a trade-off for how quickly you can make rotations. That's mostly what I'm going to talk about as far as soaking experience goes. Overall, just the big ideas, big picture ideas are, it's a global thing. You want to soak as much as possible for your team, and you need to figure out what time you need to soak, whether it's time to soak or it's time to push. You need to make sure you're still making good rotations. You can make good rotations while still soaking well. But you want to make sure that you're not letting go of like 7+ minions dying to towers. And if you don't need to rotate, you can freeze a lane and get XP that way. You keep yourself safer that way, as well as also kind of denying your opponent some experience in some ways. So both are valid strategies. There's a trade-off there between rotations and freezing the lane. Just as there's a rotation for, or there's a trade-off for pushing versus soaking. You just have to figure out what you need to do at any given point in time and figure out when you need to soak and when you don't. So if you have any questions or concerns, thoughts, ideas, post them down below. Let me know. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, my next episode, but I'm hoping to do something maybe a little bit more strategically oriented like this, rather than like a hero or a map review. So stick around. I'll see you guys next time. Later.